Hello everyone, my name is Brad Spates, Executive Chef here at COOKOLOGY, and today I'm going to teach you to make the perfect pumpkin pie. We're going to start with the crust, and then we'll do the filling. I want to make a filling that is from a fresh pumpkin, not a canned pumpkin. I'll go through the procedure as we get there. The crust, though, starts with pure all-purpose flour, not a bleached flour or a whole wheat flour, but a standard all-purpose. And it's important to stick with an all-purpose flour just so that the crust stays flaky. A all-wheat flour will make it very mealy and dense. And to this, we're going to add butter. 2.5 cups of flour, 1 cup of ice-cold butter, and you can see how I have it cut into cubes. When we put it in, it's important to make sure that you don't manipulate it too much with your hands, or it will get melted and make this ball of dough. And we want to create these small particles of butter rather than melting the butter. Now, if you have hot hands, you can use pastry forks, or you can use a blender. If you work it carefully with your hands, you can basically mash it until it's in small enough pieces that each piece of butter is smaller than pea size. Pea size would be the biggest we want to see these. And it's going to take a couple minutes. The key thing to do here is to pick the butter up and let it fall between your fingers so that you're not holding on to it too long. We're almost there. You can see I still have some pieces here that are, I don't know, probably about 1/2 inch in diameter. Those are the ones I want to get rid of. I don't want anything bigger than, say, this, which is about pea size. Making sure that when you grab this, most people want to grab and squeeze, and you want to squeeze but let it fall through your fingers. That way it has the least amount of surface contact with your hand so it doesn't melt. Again, we're not looking for a dough to form yet. We're just looking to create these small balls of butter distributed evenly throughout the flour. The idea here is that when you put it in the oven, the butter melts, turns to steam, and makes this puff up and light and flaky. Once we have the consistency we're looking for, it should look like a rough cornmeal, and when you squeeze it, it should hold together. That's what we're looking for. Then 1 teaspoon of salt and 1 teaspoon of sugar, and we just want to mix this in until it's evenly incorporated. And then 1/2 cup of cool water. The liquid is what's going to bring this together into a pie dough, not the butter. The biggest problem most people have with a pie dough is they want that butter to turn into a dough, so they keep squeezing until it's very soft and overworked, and you end up with this mealy, tough dough more than anything. Okay, we're almost there now. I've got this mound of dough, and you can see how it's still kind of crumbly and falling apart. And that's an important thing to look for, because we don't want it to be nice and smooth and over-compacted. If it gets over-compacted, then you end up with that mealy type of dough like you would find pre-rolled in grocery stores. It's this crumbliness that makes it flaky and want to fall apart after you cook it. So once you get to this point, you're done. Let it sit. It's important you go wash your hands. If you don't, it's going to be a sticky mess throughout the whole process. You have to get your hands washed, fresh start, then we'll move on to the rolling. Okay, so this is the pie dough. We're going to take and roll it out now. I only need about half this much for a bottom pie. This makes enough dough to do the bottom crust and then a top crust if it was an apple pie or a berry pie. Since it's a pumpkin pie, we only need the bottom crust. So I'm going to cut it in half. You can reserve this. It freezes well. When you cut it in half, you can still see these big chunks of butter, and that's what's going to make this light and flaky. Sit that to the side, reserve for later. Then we're going to put a small amount of flour on our rolling surface, just enough so that this doesn't stick. I want to form this into kind of a mound and then pat it out into a disc so we have a beginning shape for what we're aiming at. If I wanted it to be rectangle, I'd start at rectangle, but since we're going circular, I want to start it in a disc. A little bit of flour on top, and we will roll. You want to roll in one direction and then reflour, pick the dough up, and rotate 90 degrees, and then continue rolling. And after this about doubles in size each time, you're going to pick it up, reflour, turn it 90 degrees every single time. And we want to roll this until we get it about 1/8 to 1/4 inch thick. you're going to have spots like this that are going to be buttery, and that's those big pats of butter that are still present in the dough. That's okay. Don't worry about it. It's those big pieces of butter that are going to ensure this is light and flaky. Now, when we go to pick this up from now on, it's easier if you pick it up and roll it over your rolling pin, and then just pick the whole rolling pin up rather than try to hold it in your hand. Then you can lay it back down, unroll it, and then continue rolling. Once we have the desired thickness, I'm not really worried about size and shape, mostly because as long as it's bigger than the pie, I can cut it once I put it in the pie pan. I just have to get the desired thickness. It's about 1/8 inch thick. Don't worry about the edges. They're always a little thicker. I'm more worried about the 90% in the center. Then you want to get your pie pan to the side so that you can take your crust and roll it up over the rolling pin. Then pick your rolling pin up and then roll the pie crust right on top. Carefully pick up the edges and allow the pie crust to fall down towards the center of the pan all the way around till it's pressed down into all of the crevices. Then you want to take just your thumb or your pointer finger here and press around, pinching off the extra crust. Now, if you get a hole in the bottom, and this is pretty good, but sometimes you'll get a tear or something in the bottom, don't worry about it too much. You can always patch it with extra pie crust. No one's going to see the bottom of the pan, so it really doesn't matter. And then you can take your thumb and press them together around the edges, just pushing it up to create a small indentation, which kind of seals it all the way around the top, just like so. Now that our pie pan is lined, we set it aside. It needs to refrigerate for about 30 minutes, just until the crust gets nice and firm again. While that's happening, we'll make our pie filling, and then we'll get in the oven. Now we're going to make the filling for our pumpkin pie. The first thing I want to talk about is the actual pumpkin. I used fresh pumpkins that I roasted. You could certainly use a canned pumpkin product. Canned pumpkins tend to be half sweet potato or yam or a squash. To get a real deep pumpkin flavor, you're going to have to use real pumpkins. I prefer the cheese pumpkins, which are larger flat pumpkin, or a pie pumpkin, which is the small ones. I roasted them in the oven, then I cut them in half, scraped out the seeds, and then pulled all the flesh out and pureed it in a food processor or a blender or something of that nature is fine. 2 cups of the pureed pumpkin go in a bowl. It's important that it's pureed smooth, or you'll get those strands of pumpkin in your pie. Generally speaking, that's one of the biggest issues with using fresh pumpkin. You get these long strands, so it's important that you puree very well to get it nice and smooth. Then we need eggs. 3 eggs. They should be room temperature. If they're not room temperature, as you bake the pie, you have to wait for the eggs to cook so that it doesn't fall, and then you risk the crust burning. So it's important that the entire filling be at room temperature, nothing refrigerated. Once the eggs are in, we want to go ahead and mix until this is evenly combined, and I can't see the separation of the egg whites and the egg yolks and the pumpkin. To this, we're going to add sugar, 3/4 cup of sugar, and then our spices. 1/2 teaspoon of nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon of ground ginger, and 1 teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Again, just stirring until combined and we can't see the separation of ingredient. We risk in a mixer over mixing this and probably whipping it with a paddle or a whisk attachment, and then we start incorporating air, and then we end up with more of a custard or this soft, almost cheese type filling or souffle type filling. And what we're really looking for is that American style, very dense and thick filling. So no air incorporation is key. Then we add heavy cream. This is 1 cup of heavy cream, 1/2 cup of milk. And this is basically just to up the fat content and act as the thinning agent to make this more of a custard and less of like a ravioli filling. Essentially, we had a filling before. Again, just until incorporated, so I can't see any streaks of cream in it. It should be a kind of off orange color, somewhere between a mute yellow and orange. And then we'll pour this into our pie crust. Again, it's important that the pie crust is chilled. You want to fill it a good 7/8 of the way full, not right directly to the rim, but it should have about a 1/4 inch along the top, because it's going to puff up slightly and the crust is going to sink down into the top of the custard. This goes in the oven, 350 degrees for 35 minutes, just until you stick a knife into the center and it comes out clean. This is our finished pie out of the oven. You can see we have these nice brown spots over the top. That's the caramelized sugar. And then the crust is golden brown and light and flaky. We're going to pipe on some whipped cream in the center, add some toasted pecans, and sprinkle it with cinnamon. You want to squeeze from the back in a small circle on the pie, working in a circular motion. Now we're going to add some fresh ground cinnamon. I just have a small amount in the center of a strainer. I want to hold it up high and just lightly tap the side so it distributes evenly over the pie. And then we're going to add just some fresh ground pecans right to the top. Thanks for watching. Check out our website, cookologyonline.com, and our blog at cookologyonline.com/blog.